stock sell-off on Wall Street. The Dow sees its worst day since March, while the Nasdaq was the worst loser in the overnight session. Investors now look ahead to Fed Chair Jerome Powell's speech at the Jackson Hole Economic Summit later today. Stocks in the Asia-Pacific trade with cuts following a weak handover from Wall Street. The GIFT Nifty is also implying a lower start for the Indian market. And the MPC minutes show members are prepared to look through the first round of food inflation, which I will watch to see if it persists and lead to higher wages. The minutes also show RBI is determined to squeeze out liquidity. Bond dealers fear CRR hikes may continue. And the Indian Armed Forces will place orders for weapons totaling 7,800 crore rupees to improve operational capabilities. The Defence Acquisition Council says all orders will be sourced from Indian manufacturers. And the five nations BRICS group is set to expand after 13 years. Saudi Arabia, Iran, the UAE, Argentina, Egypt and Ethiopia have been invited to join the bloc from January of next year. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says the expansion will make the grouping stronger. Good morning and welcome to Power Breakfast. I'm Pavitra Parekh. Those are the top headlines that we have for you this morning. There's a lot to track in terms of the global market action because we got an extremely weak handover from Wall Street ahead of the big cue that pretty much the entire world is tracking right now, which is the Fed Chair's speech later today at the Jackson Hole Symposium. So on the back of that weak handover, you have all of the Asian markets which are opening with cuts and pretty steep cuts at that. What's looking the worst right now is the Nikkei index. The Japanese market is trading with cuts of over 550 points. It's down 1.7%. You have some of the others on your screen. So the Taiwanese market's down 1.3%. Seng is down over 1% as well. And actually, across the board for Asia, most of them are seeing pretty steep cuts come through. The Kospi is down around 0.5%. You have Shanghai also, which is seeing a cut of around 0.5%. So whichever way you look at it, definitely an extremely weak start for Asia. The GIFT Nifty will come up for you, and the implied open for our own markets is also sharply lower. It's around 90 points in the red, and this after we saw that last hour sell-off yesterday to end below that 19,400 mark. So let's see how we really move from here. The start is going to be in the red, but let's see how the rest of the trading session pans out. That's what's happening in Asia, actually. Let's now take a look at the US markets as well. Wall Street, like I was pointing out, ended Thursday session sharply lower following a short-lived tech rally on the back of Nvidia's stronger than expected earnings. So investors now brace for key comments coming through from US Fed Chair Jerome Powell, who is all set to address the Jackson Hole Economic Conference later today. So if you look at the market action, we saw the Dow close with an over 370-point cut yesterday. This is actually the worst day that we've seen on the Dow since March. The S&P 500 also lost over 1%, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq, perhaps the worst performer there, 1.9% in the red. So that lost over 250 points as well. Meanwhile, if you look at the key data that really came through from the US, it was the unemployment claims, which dropped to a 3-week low, indicating that demand for workers remains quite healthy. So strong data, of course, bad for the markets right now because hikes could be feared once again. So that's what's happening across the US markets as well. But like we mentioned, the key cue is that all eyes will be on the Jackson Hole conference later today. The all-important speech by the US Fed Chair this evening is that big cue that markets worldwide are tracking as well. So let's listen into comments from Philadelphia Fed President Patrick Harker on the sidelines of that event on what he really expects this time around.
Right now, I think that we've probably done enough because we have two things going on, right? Both the Fed funds rate increases. They are at a restrictive level, so let's keep them there for a while. And also, we are continuing to shrink our balance sheet, and that is also removing accommodation. I'm in the camp of let the restrictive stance work for a while. Let's just let this play out for a while, and that should bring inflation down. We clearly have to deal with inflation, and we are. We have a restrictive stance, in my view, and we should keep it there for a while. We can talk about that. But in terms of GDP growth and low inflation, low unemployment, where have we seen this before? Before the pandemic. Okay. So there are models, but then there's what we've experienced in the past. We've experienced this situation. So is it possible that we can get back to that situation? Yes, I think so. We're looking at us going back to trend growth at 2%. It's going to take a couple of years, maybe, or even sooner. We're seeing inflation coming down under 4% this year, then 3%, then 2% in 2025. It's going to take time as well.
All right, that's the word coming in from Patrick Harker on the inflation picture right now and what the Fed might do. But speaking about the US market once more, like I was pointing out yesterday, we did see a brief tech rally, of course, before all of the gains were given up. And this was led by mega cap Nvidia's earnings, which were well above what the street was expecting. Now, the AI chipmaker stellar earnings performance is what had really sort of taken it higher, even after a trade day before it was doing very well. So let's listen into what Ashwath Damodaran, professor of finance at the NYU Stern School of Business, makes of Nvidia's valuation.
This is a stock that's had near-death experiences. I mean, sometimes companies, investors look at companies like Nvidia and say, I could never buy a stock like this. It's so richly priced. I mean, this stock was $30 6 years ago. So, and it's had near-death experiences. It's dropped 50, 60, 80%. These are companies where if the momentum shifts, you can very quickly see a route in the other direction. You've seen this on Tesla. And I think you could see this in NVIDIA as well. So if you haven't been lucky enough to add NVIDIA yet, I think that there will be a point somewhere in the next year or two when fear is greatest. You will not feel comfortable buying NVIDIA at 150. You will be buying in a moment of fear, but I think there will be moments with NVIDIA where it'll become a good investment again.
All right, that is Ashwath Damodaran on Nvidia. Right now, the valuations are way too high for comfort, but perhaps in the future, if it does come down, you could look at an investment. That is his view. But with that, let's also talk about all of the cues that you should track before we get into this trading session. We have Vivek and Surbi joining us with the trade setup right now. Guys, a very good morning to both of you. Vivek, coming to you, the handover that we were just going through looks quite terrible.
Well, you're absolutely right. Going into the last day of the week, even yesterday's trading session, expiry day. But despite that last hour sell-off, we also are seeing very subdued cues from overnight indices as well. US markets, worst day for the Dow Jones since March 2023. All eyes on what Fed Chair Powell has to say at the Jackson Hole Symposium today. When you're talking about crude oil prices too, ended with minor cuts. Brent futures down, flattish but down 0.2% at the $833 a barrel markup. Indian markets yesterday, if we discuss that, clearly selling pressure witnessed. We opened gap up. First half of the session, we were actually in the green, but post that significant selling pressure. And yesterday, financials that so far were doing quite well. Yesterday, both the Nifty as well as the Nifty Bank slipped over 1% from the intraday highs. However, broader end of the markets, the momentum sustained, fresh record highs. And in yesterday's trading session, clearly, the story of the day was the number of block deals that happened. You saw big block deals happening in Coforge. You saw block deals happening in Max Financial, Manappuram. And even today, that trend is set to continue, with sources indicating that Amber Enterprises too is likely to see a large block deal. Primary market activity continues to be quite hectic, with subscription numbers quite strong as well. Aeroflex Industries, end of day 3, oversubscribed 97 times. And the new IPO that opened yesterday, Vishnu Prakash, that too is oversubscribed 3.77. Like you mentioned, Asian markets as well as Gift Nifty indicating a gap down start for our own markets.
Okay, big gap down start. Let's see how things move from there. Vivek, thanks a lot for getting us all of those cues. Let's also talk about the stocks that we should watch in today's trading session. And Surbi is here with that entire list. Surbi.
Thanks so much for that. So defense stocks will be in focus today because the Defense Acquisition Council has approved proposals worth 7,800 crores. Paytm will also be on our radar. Sources say that Anfin is going to offer 2.3 crore shares via block deals at 880 rupees per share. Amber Enterprises, like Vivek indicated, Ascent Investment Holdings is going to sell 4% stake in the company via a block deal. This is according to sources. Vedanta, the company has received an arbitration award upholding company's contention in the Rajasthan block case. Keynes Technology, the company has signed an MOU with Karnataka government for a project worth 3750 crores. Shoppers Stop, Venugopal Nair resigns as the company's CEO and MD, and the company appoints Kavindra Mishra as its executive director and CEO. And lastly, Astra Microwave will also be on our radar. The company receives orders worth 158 crores from the DRDO and ISRO.
All right, Surbi, thanks a lot for bringing us that entire list of stocks. Finally, let's also talk about what's going on with the futures and options space. Nigel is here with that. Nigel, we saw the market end of the day's low yesterday. I mean, at least the frontline index. Take us through what we should watch today.
Well, morning, Pavitra. Part of that yesterday's decline could have to do with the fact that we had weekly expiry as well that played out. But today is going to be a bit of a challenge for the scalpers. The scalpers are those that buy at lower levels and they look to square off their position intraday. So let's see how that goes. Because yesterday things looked up. till we reached a 20 DMA odd. We thought we were moving towards 19,600 odd, but we couldn't sustain over the 19,550 odd mark. The Nifty Bank, it hit that congestion zone, 44,700, 44,800 odd. What did the FIs do yesterday? Well, in trade, they unwound some long positions and they added some mild shorts, but they continue to remain net short with the total positioning on the index futures on the short side is close to around 56% odd. The PCR is trending lower. Just a couple of sessions ago, it was at around 1.1 odd. Now it's moving towards the lower end of the band. Normally, we have seen when the PCR moves to around 0.7 odd, we see a bit of a relief rally on the Nifty. So we'll have to keep an eye out on that mark. That's one of the indicators for you today. Why did the PCR move so much lower? Because call writing came back. Yeah, the 19,500 call that was fairly active in trade yesterday. And on the downside, the 19,400 put was active. Now, since the premium's around 100 rupees, I want to see what happens out there. Given that we're likely to see a bit of a gap down, we'll have to see whether or not there is some unwinding at that particular strike. Which brings us to the levels. The 20 DMA, that'll be the near-term resistance. The recent low, that'll be a bit of a support zone. And on the Nifty Bank as well, you have the 20 DMA, that's a resistance zone. We visited that mark, by the way, yesterday. And on the downside, you're counting on that 43,900, 44,000 odd mark holding out. The GIFT Nifty suggesting a 100-point downtick. If you want to risk it, then maybe in fact you go ahead and you try to buy the dip with a stop loss around 19,250, because the buying the dip in the past, irrespective of the cues, has made you some money. But I think you need to square off that position as well intraday if you do get the bit of a bounce, given the big cue that we'll get later this evening when the Fed chairman speaks. Back to you.
All right, Nigel, thanks a lot for bringing us all of those cues. That is all of, the domestic cues that you need to watch for in today's trading session, as well as some of the stocks that you should have on your radar. With that, we're going to get into a short break. But when we come back, the MPC minutes show that members are prepared to look through the first round of food inflation. We're going to bring you all of the details on the other side. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Power Breakfast. Now, like I was pointing out, the minutes of the last meeting of the RBI's Monetary Policy Committee show that the panel members are prepared to look through the first round of food inflation. The external members feel that this food inflation is largely transitory. However, one interesting indication is that the RBI is determined to squeeze out liquidity. So, Lata is here with us to take us through all of the details that came through and the highlights from the minutes. Lata.
Well, I would say the minutes are overall hawkish because all the RBI MPC members seem determined to squeeze out liquidity from the interbank system, which means the CRR hike that they announced can stay on. That's a big pain for the banks. Now, first, on the inflation itself, the RBI members are a little cautious. They believe that the first round of food inflation will ebb as tomato and vegetable prices fall, but they are a little worried about El Nino impact and global food prices. So they are just, all three of them, the governor, Deputy Governor Patra and MPC member Ranjan, say that they will watch whether there are second round impacts, like, higher food prices leading to demand for higher wages and that feeding into higher prices. That's what they would watch out for. So at the moment, they're not going to act simply because of the vegetable inflation. The external members are actually very confident, both Dr. Verma and Ashima Goyal, saying that they are optimistic that this food price rise is freak and that it will ebb and that the current repo rate need not be raised at all. Mr. Bide is a little neutral. But when it comes to liquidity, that's what the market will watch out for. It's almost very clear that Reserve Bank will go hammer and tongs at squeezing out liquidity. The governor says we will manage liquidity overhang proactively. Deputy Governor Patra says risks to inflation stem from the overhang of liquidity in the banking system. Withdrawal of excess liquidity should engage the attention of the Reserve Bank going forward. Liquidity is a threat to the Reserve Bank and the MPC's resolve to align inflation to 4%. So clearly it looks like there's a very good chance that the higher CRR on excess liquidity that was announced in the August 10th policy may not be taken away on September 8th as promised. Maybe some other ways of squeezing out liquidity will remain. So we should be prepared for higher deposit rates and therefore higher lending rates.
All right, Lata, thanks a lot for getting us all of the highlights from the RBI MPC's minutes. But with that, let's also move on and bring you some more interesting news. Reliance Retail has launched a youth-centric fashion brand called Yousta, opening its first store in the city of Hyderabad. Now, the company plans to open over 200 stores under the brand across India. This is by the end of this year. And as the name suggests, Yousta, this targets young customers and is set to offer affordable fashion products. So let's listen in to Reliance Retail's president and CEO for fashion, Akhilesh Prasad, on what he had to say about the launch.
It is a format which is fashion forward, pocket friendly, and will be present throughout the length and breadth of the country. So while this is our first store, and very soon, that means before the end of the year, you will see us opening or identifying at least 200 store points in the country. We intend to be a large player in the market over the next 3 years.
Okay, that is on the new brand Yousta that is being launched by Reliance Retail. But with that, it is time for a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk all about the commodities market. So stay tuned for all of those highlights. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Power Breakfast. Now, let's talk about what's going on with the commodities. Manisha joins us for that. Manisha, you know, we were just going through all of the global market action and things are looking quite weak. How is it looking on the commodities end?
Well, not so great, really, because many of these commodities are headed for a weekly decline for us as well. So the crude oil prices are headed for a second weekly decline. It's down between 2 to 3% for various crude varieties. The economic data, including the PMI numbers that came in from US and Eurozone, have shown weak activity. Also, Japan has reported a third month of decline in factory activity. So the major economy is clearly not looking any great, and that's weighing onto the demand side of it. And then for the US as well, we have seen higher inventory build up in US gas and distillate. But all of these markets are now waiting for the Powell speech that is in the evening today. And ahead of that, the dollar index is yet again hitting a 2.5-month highs. There is pressure that we've seen in case of gold and silver as well. The last couple of sessions were good, but both of these commodities also have come off their highs ahead of the US Fed Chair speech. I doubt if any of the time zones really are going to look at big volumes or big market activity ahead of that speech today.
All right, Manisha, thanks a lot for getting us all of those cues. That is the big one to really watch for, the Fed Chair speech later today, and we are tracking it across the board, across asset classes as well. But with that, it is time to bring you some important updates from the global front as well. Now, former US President Donald Trump surrendered in an election fraud case overnight in the state of Georgia, where he was accused of attempting to overturn the 2020 election loss. This is the fourth time that the former president has faced criminal charges. He appeared at the Fulton County Jail, which later released him on a $200,000 bond. And while leaving the Atlanta airport, Trump denied any wrongdoing and reiterated that he has the right to challenge his defeat in the 2020 election. So that is something important that we're tracking. But moving on, I also want to bring you the latest from the world of sports. Five-time world chess champion Magnus Carlsen beat Indian prodigy Pragnananda to win his first Chess World Cup title at Azerbaijan. The finals were decided by a tiebreaker of 2 rapid matches. Carlsen took the first of these, while the second ended in a draw, giving him the title. All right, so that is all of the time that we have on this edition of Power Breakfast. Thank you all very much for tuning in. We leave you with the Asian markets sharply in the red, the GIFT Nifty indicating a gap down start for the Indian market. Let's see how things really move. We are Bazaar after this short break.